Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 50th anniversary celebration. Once again, as I look out across the room, it's just, we're glad you all are here. As I look out, this is the FEMA family. So we really do appreciate all of you being here, whether you're a former employee, our state partners, our federal and state elected officials, tribal representatives. Once again, we thank you for being here and being part of this celebration. We've heard some stories about Welcome Wilson, and last night I had the honor of meeting Welcome for the first time and going to dinner and sharing some stories. And from the stories I've heard, certainly if you had two people that you wanted in your corner, it would have been Bill Utter and Welcome Wilson fighting for you. And Welcome worked very closely with Bill and other federal officials and state officials and local officials to get the FRC and make it a reality in Denton. Welcome was appointed by President Eisenhower as the five-state director of Civil and Defense Mobilization, which at that time was a division of the Executive Office of the President. In 1966, he was appointed Special Ambassador to Nicaragua by President Lyndon Johnson. He was a witness to the atom bomb test in Nevada in 1954 and the hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific Ocean in 1956. Welcome received the Arthur S. Fleming Award as one of the 10 outstanding young men in federal service in 1958. He received the Texas Business Hall of Fame has named Welcome Wilson Sr. as legend and honoree in 2011, and he was also named the Entrepreneur of the Year by the Houston Technology Center in 2011. Please help me welcome Welcome Wilson.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to get reacquainted with some of my contemporaries who are here today. Roy Appleton, for example, Leroy Williamson, Betty Gage. I have so many fond memories of Denton, Texas. I have some notes here. Actually, I have a photographic memory, but sometimes I'm out of film. Nowadays, Chastity, I only remember the important things, whatever they were. In my short remarks, I'm going to make 2 points. First, I would like to paint the picture of America in the 1950s, a different time. In 1951, I think it was, 1946, Winston Churchill made his famous Iron Curtain speech in Missouri. An Iron Curtain has dropped all across Europe, and that was the case. The threat of nuclear war was very, very real and very, very nearby. Let me give you an example. Before I was appointed by Eisenhower, I'd been Director of Civil Defense in Houston, Texas, working for Judge Roy Hoffines, the mayor. Well, nobody worried about traffic. Nobody worried about the economy. Nobody worried about global warming. People worried about nuclear attack. Everybody. And give it one example. Once a year, we had what we called Operation Alert, and we would shut down the entire city, Bill. The entire city would be shut down, all the streets off, cars off the street. People would have to go into buildings and hunker down and all that kind of stuff. And the effect on the economy must have been tremendous. Nobody even gave it a thought. Everybody thought it was so important that Houston, Texas be ready for a nuclear attack. One other quick representative of those days. As Director of Civil Defense in Houston, I put ID tags on 200,000 children. ID tags. Why? So that when they were killed, we could identify them. Now, is that gruesome or what? But people in those days were ready for or were expecting an attack. Now, so it's in that context that this center was built. The federal government had a facility outside of Washington, D.C. called High Point. They now call it Mount Weather. That shows you the FEMA's influence. And in that facility, the President of the United States and the cabinet officers would be housed in the event of an emergency. It was bomb-proof and all the rest of it and so forth. So they wanted the same facilities for the regional offices. So as part of the executive office of the President, they wanted the regional directors in Dallas-Fort Worth to have a facility that the federal government can be run out of in the event Dallas-Fort Worth was blown off the face of the earth. So that's what this headquarters was built for. The second thing was that we were the first alternative to High Point, meaning that if High Point was out of communication, whether it was destroyed or just out of communication, the regional director of the GSA in Dallas, or Fort Worth actually, would be sitting here running the entire GSA in the country. The same with the health department and the housing department and so forth. So that this headquarters was to be the center of government in the event that the national headquarters was out of touch. And guess who would be the commander-in-chief? Me. Is that a scary thought or what? So anyway, it was a tense time and a interesting time, and Frank Ocker had such a big part of it that he was our congressman from Denton. He was also later the president of the American Petroleum Association for many years. All right, so how did we get this center? The national director, Leo Hoig, who was a former governor of Iowa, told we regional directors that one of the regions would be selected to build the first underground center. There was a little support for it in the Congress, by the way, who was always parsimonious in those days about money. So he said, I want each of you to compete to see where the center would be located. And he said, whoever wins the competition will put the center there and so forth. So I came back to Denton, where Bill Utter was president of the Chamber of Commerce. Roy Appleton was president of the newspaper. And we started organizing a campaign. So the first thing we did was promise that we would pay for the land. We didn't have to write the check then, thank heavens, but we promised that we would. So that when the legislation was finally passed, it didn't provide any money for land. The second thing is we started a campaign. Bill Utter and others, Roy and Riley Clawcross and Hoford Russell. Who here remembers Hoford Russell? A great American. Just an aside. When Dallas-Fort Worth Airport was being built, knowing that my future was going to be in real estate, I went down there and found this great piece of land a mile from the airport for $500 an acre. I begged Hoford to join with me and buy it. And he said, that's overpriced farmland. It'll never be worth anything and so forth. So anyway, we didn't buy it and we didn't get rich. But thanks to Bill Utter, and by the way, the Utter family lived at the end of the block where we lived. They lived on the end of the block. We lived in the middle. What was the name of the street? Woodhaven. And I had great memories from Woodhaven. But we worked laboriously, week after week after week, putting pressure on the congressman and so forth. We talked to the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, Lyndon Johnson, and who, by the way, played a special part because he was thinking of running for President of the United States. So in 1959, he ran in 1960. So in 1959, he was very alert to doing things that would help Denton, Texas. But anyway, after many weeks of campaigning and so forth, we finally got the money for it. The first thing we had to do was to get the director of the Office of Civil and Defense Mobilization to designate Denton as the first choice. So one day he telephoned me. I was in Washington. I had a office in the executive office building right next to the White House. And by the way, in the afternoon, I could look out my window from my office, and there would be the President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, hitting golf balls. I can't tell you what a warm feeling it gave you to see the President of the United States out there hitting golf balls. You felt the country must be in great shape. But anyway, so finally, we in Denton, Texas, Bill Utter and Roy and others, convinced the national director that we could get the political support to get the money. The problem was the money. So when we finally convinced the director, he called me in his office and he said, all right, if you can get Lyndon Johnson, the majority leader of the Senate, and Sam Rayburn, the Speaker of the House, and Albert Thomas, the chairman of the Independent Officers Appropriations Committee, to call me within the next hour, we'll put it in Denton, Texas. So we got on the phone. I called Frank Eichard, who was very, very influential, by the way. John, you're here? There's John. He worked for Frank. So he got immediately through to the Speaker of the House. I called Walter Jenkins, who was the Chief of Staff to Lyndon Johnson, and Albert Thomas and other things, and sure enough, within 30 minutes, all three had called the director. So then he said, all right, Denton gets it if we can get the money. And so that's when the work began. And thanks to Bill Utter and Roy and many other people, we were successful in getting the facility approved for Denton and to raise the money. And I want to thank all of those here for your service to this great country of ours. And these gentlemen, for their service. I've been a businessman for most of my life now, and I can't tell you, I recognize the great sacrifice that people make when they work for the federal government and the job that they do. Thank you very much.
Welcome on up.
Wow. You know, everybody else presented something to the administrator, so I'm going to do it too. This is a photograph when LBJ came to the site in Denton, Texas, and over here the sign says, site of the nation's first federal underground center. And that's Johnson and a guy with dark black hair. I'm not sure who it is. But anyway, I'd like to present this to you.
Welcome, and I'd like to give to you one of our FEMA coins, along with one of our regional coins, for your commitment to this facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.